Luke, welcome to the Rut. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem, no problem. You're in sunny Ibiza. I presume it's sunny.
It is today. It hasn't been for the last few days. It's been big thunderstorms, but yeah, I kind of split my time between here and England, and we absolutely we're on the most definitely not the party side of the island. There's kind of two halves to Ibiza, and we're on the kind of more hippie well-being side. That's for sure.
Excellent, excellent. I ask everybody who comes on the podcast this question.
Mm.
Why did you want to come on and talk to me about your story? Bar me, obviously, begging you for the last few months.
No, I think the real reason, the absolute nub of it is because my own personal development and recovery from everything that's sort of been in my backstory has been sharing, has been talking and connecting. And I know from my first ever group session in the Priory when I was in there nearly 9 years ago, that first session when I heard someone else share and talk about what I was feeling was
Yeah,
just extraordinarily powerful for me, because I felt so lonely up to that point. I felt
yeah.
like I was the only person in the world. So coming onto podcasts and well, having the opportunity to come on and talk about these things, and whether they only benefit you and I, or even one other person, that's good enough for me. So I'm always happy to do it.
Awesome. I've read your book, Back from the Edge. Incredible read. Um, I want to dive into your story really, because with the rut, we go through the story of how people got into their ruts, and yours was quite a large rut. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
So take me back to Luke growing up, Luke playing cricket, and kind of how your model of the world developed around you.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I had I guess an unusual childhood in that we were moving around the world. I lived in Peru, I lived in Norway, I lived in Holland. I had a little spell in the Oman as well. I was all, it was a very kind of transient life where I was
Mm,
used to kind of moving on and getting used to new cultures and new countries. I was generally used to hot weather. Even when I first went to school in England, boarding school in England, when I was 8, 9 years old, I'd actually spent very little time in England up to that point, or even Europe. Um, so yeah, I had this kind of this sort of slightly unusual childhood, but I don't know when necessarily, but I always just had this fierce competitiveness. I was an absolute pain. That's the truth. I was kind of, it was like a rage in me at times that, I love to compete. And when I was from Peru, I got into swimming, and it was in outdoor pools. And I kind of even remember the first few competitions I swam in, and just the feeling of being on the block and that kind of buzz of,
mm.
we're about to go here and I don't know what's going to happen. And there's almost, I don't know, there's a mixture of being terrified and excited. It's kind of this weird, bit in the middle. And I was just immediately hooked on it. And so I was fiercely competitive. And then I had an older brother. We used to compete on all sorts of stuff as and when I was able to see him. I'd play squash with my dad and be convinced that I'd be able to beat my dad when, he was obviously significantly older and
Yeah.
stronger than me. And so that was me, coming through. And then, I went then to a huge sports school. I'm doing a little bit of a disservice, but Millfield School, which has got an incredible
Yeah.
kind of sports tradition. And it was almost like the perfect place for a kid like me to go to, because Millfield, it just produces elite sports people. And so I was in, and I was kind of that, I was the sort of model type of kid to go into that. And actually, my obsession with swimming moved to cricket, and I don't really know why. I think it was, I actually just liked being part of a team a little bit more, and swimming was
Mm,
relatively lonely, kind of looking at the bottom of the pool at 5:30 in the morning.
yeah.
And I got into cricket, and there was the thing that I got hooked on with cricket was it was an almost addictive nature, the moorishness of it. There was kind of like, I remember thinking, oh, I could get 30 runs, but then I could actually get 50 runs. I could actually get 70 runs. And it was almost like, this is endless. I can keep going here. And I just got hooked into it. And so I was from a Millfield for golly 10 years, 9, 10 years, and it was breeding in me about achieving success, winning. That was what it was all about for me. And so when I went into professional cricket, when I left school, pretty much, I was ready.
That was it.
Mm.
You describe in the book how you were introduced to alcohol around 16.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of moreish, right? You had this distinct work hard, play hard mentality moving into cricket, and that kind of you took pride in partying harder than everybody else. Why do you think that was?
I think it was a combination of things. I think by nature, I was a pressure cooker. I was kind of like, it was so sort of this rage and fierce intensity in me. It needed to go somewhere. It needed to be released away from the sporting field as well at times. I also, as I left school, I moved into a cricket culture, which was a real drinking culture. It was
Really?
yeah, absolutely. It was, you were straight into it. There was no, it's not what it is today. I played in the what we call the second team, which is basically the reserve team when I was 16. And we'd go on away trips and it would be kind of partying. And the key was always, could you back it up the next day? You
Really?
party, could you back it up? And the real strong characters could
It's a
do
challenge
that.
in itself, right?
Absolutely. The guys that would almost be idolized and seen as the real leaders.
And this was Lancashire, not Derbyshire.
No, this was Somerset.
Somerset, okay.
Somerset. So I went to Somerset before Derbyshire, and then
Right.
And also the thing for me with alcohol is, and especially people who run into troubles with it, they often, some people can talk about how they crossed the line where it kind of was normal and then it became abnormal.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever had normal. It was always pretty extreme for me. I was kind of like on it, and it's a bit like me training or doing anything. It was like there was no, it was like 0 to 60 in as fast a time as I could. And so, when I went into that culture, it was partying, but I also just sort of accelerated into it. And then this culture of, well, can you back it up next day? I was like, damn right, I can back it up next day. And then, I'd be sort of acknowledged and liked for it. And I just thought that was me. I think I write in the book that, I thought I'd found myself, this work hard, play hard mentality. This was me.
That was your way of being successful in life.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was I had kind of a method, and I needed to blow off steam when I needed to blow off steam, and I would do that with real pride. And then when it was time to train, I would purge myself and punish myself to try and be the best I could be. And it was a method.
But that punishing yourself, and we'll get on to the more depression side of things and how you describe addiction in the book to be like this ever decreasing circle, which then comes in closer and closer. But that punishing yourself, I mean, what were you punishing yourself about?
I guess because that's a very good question, actually, and I've not ever been asked that before. I think it's because I couldn't control my drinking. So when I would drink, something would happen.
Right.
There would be trouble in one way or another. I would say something, do something, be somewhere that I shouldn't be. And so the cover up the next day was all. It was like a full-time job half the time, or being embarrassed, or and so there was a bit of me that loathed myself for that. And having to put the mask on that it was all fun and games, and lads will be lads. And deep down, I was like, oh, I don't want to do this. I can't. But I was in, I was in that lifestyle, and as soon as I had one beer, it would become 20. So then trouble would come, and then the shame and the self-loathing would come, and it was. I think that's where the punishment came from. I didn't deep down. I didn't want to be like that, but I just didn't know how else to be.
You describe having deep-rooted problems with alcohol. Why do you think alcohol induced these problems? What were you trying to subdue?
I was trying to escape. I'm kind of saying this with clarity now, but you could bear in mind it's sort of nearly 9 years. I've not had a drink, and I've done a lot of work, so I've kind of got a good
Mm.
perspective on it. I didn't know this at the time, but I think I was just trying to escape and just escape the pressure cooker of my head, the pressure I put myself under, the attachment I had to being successful and looking successful, just as
Right.
important.
Interesting.
And yeah, it was just exhausting. It was exhausting. So when could have a beer, it was like I could slip into a world which wasn't really reality,
Mm.
and I could get away from, and someone once said to me, what are you trying to escape from? And I said, I think I'm trying to escape from me.
Yeah.
It's just like have a break from this mental bloke that, I've got in my head half the time. And so I think that's what it was, and with alcohol, it's kind of socially acceptable,
Mm.
and, it's easily accessible. And so it was easy for me.
Mm.
And so I think that's what it was about.
And then you had the really tragic loss of your girlfriend at the time in a car accident, and you were very close to proposing to her, and awful experience. I mean, how do you reflect back on that, and um, what impact did that have? Did that kind of accelerated the problems and the drinking? It almost gave you, I imagine, a bit of an excuse to be like, look, this has happened to me, therefore I can just go off on one, essentially.
Yeah, I think, looking back, it happened to me in my kind of late 20s, and or mid late 20s. And I think I just got to a point in my life where I felt like I had some balance and some peace, and
Mm.
Nia really gave me that, and sort of I'd really, I guess looking back, it was very kind of codependent on her.
Mm.
She provided me with that self-worth that I didn't feel I really had deep down, and gave me a view of life beyond just, whether you win or lose. And I felt like I just got to that place in life, and then it was like this atomic bomb arrived, and it was just, like anyone who's unfortunately suffered from that kind of tragic event, there's no warning. It's just bang. It's like, deal with it. And I just went for days just sort of thinking, maybe she's run away, maybe she's disappeared, maybe this isn't true, because it's so huge, you can't quite get your head around it. It's like, because you weren't there, you didn't see it, it's really heartbreaking.
Mm.
And
What was the
I think
aftermath like?
it was I felt like every insecurity and every fragility I had within my own self-worth, and I don't know what else to describe it. I just exploded, and it just shattered, and I fell apart. I didn't know, I had in my head that I had to appear strong and successful because that's how I led my life.
Mm.
And yet this happened, and I still felt like I have to look strong and successful,
Mm.
and yet I was I was rotting,
Mm.
and I didn't know whether to cry too much, too little, whatever it might be. And uh, and it was just, I found it incredibly difficult. And I actually remember I was angry as much as anything. I was really an angry young man. And I remember having a real conscious thought, thinking, well, life's burnt me. That's how I kind of considered it. I remember saying I trusted in life. I think I was probably sort of reflecting on, I trusted in a version of God, or something I depicted in my mind. I called it life, and I trusted you, and you've burnt me. And so I was like, okay, this is on my terms now.
Mm.
And everything just accelerated. Drinking, working hard, intensity,
Mm.
obsession, everything. It just went up a notch.
And you're still playing well, presumably keeping well, scoring first class runs.
Yeah, I was. I mean, it happened to, was not funny, but today is actually the anniversary of her death. And so it happened at the back end of the cricket season. And so I went into the winter. So I had basically 6 months of trying to get myself sorted. So by the time the season came around the next year, I'd had some time to get myself together. And And yeah, I was, you know, I was probably getting towards the sort of peak years of my career. So I was playing well. Excuse me. And, yeah, I was kind of hanging in there, and you know, I just, the intensity that I'd brought to drinking, I'd also brought to my game. So my game moved up a level, but it was
Really?
just, yeah, absolutely. But the question was it manageable and sustainable? You know,
No.
the answer in the end was no. I was literally killing myself. But for that period of time, I was just maximizing what I could out of myself.
I want to paint a picture though, like this is all going on in the background. You're obviously playing really, really good cricket. Um, how how much were you drinking at the time? What was the lifestyle like? I mean, obviously batting, keeping, playing cricket during the week and then on the weekend, and presumably what, going home and having beers or spirits, etc. What was it like?
Yeah. So the thing with all of these sorts of problems is that they don't. Someone once described it to me. You know, if the first time you picked up a beer, you know, you kind of went to jail, lost your job, your wife left you, you'd never drink again. You'd be like, no, this is crazy. I'm not doing this. The reality is these sorts of problems happen very gradually. So there's not, you know, suddenly you find yourself in a place you're like, oh my goodness, how's this happened? You know, it was like the first time I decided to have a drink in the morning. It kind of, you know, I normalized it.
Mm.
But there was a moment I was like, how have I got here? You know, what's happened here? And so, you know, for a lot of my career, it wasn't about drinking every day or every night, not at all. It was about, there would always be a period where I wouldn't, and then I'd have a window where I'd just go
Right.
berserk. And so,
Binging essentially.
yeah, exactly. Huge binges. So, you know, if, for instance, you know, I can think of time when we would arrive the 2 days before a game. So say, I'm making it up. Say we arrived on a Friday and the game started on the Sunday. So effectively we had a day of training in order to play the next day. And, you know, we've got a day of training preparing for a game. It's not a period of time that you should be doing anything. But I would, you know, if I kind of was in a weak enough place, or I got tempted, or, you know, say I had one beer on the Friday night, that'd be it. I'd be drinking till 7 o'clock in the morning till the Saturday, have a couple of hours sleep, have to get up, train, you know, go through training, hide it, do my stuff. You know, I'd feel terrible, and then back it up for the game on the Sunday. It was that kind of thing that this was how it started to sort of venture into areas where, you know, probably someone could have looked at me and gone, is everything all right here? Because it would happen too regularly doing that. And then eventually towards the end, when, you know, the last sort of year of my career, I was drinking at home, you know, on my own. And then I'd wake up the next morning, you know, kind of crippled with anxiety and panic attacks, and have
What
to
did
find
anxiety feel like for you?
suffocating.
Really?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, I felt it physically, you know, I know lots of people do, but I almost like, you know, like a combination of indigestion and panic, and just like up
Yeah.
in top of my chest. And I just wanted to hide in a corner. You know, the wheels would have come off, you know, by now. I just wanted to hide in a corner and cry. I just couldn't, you know, I always describe anxiety for me as being, you know, for one reason or another, you know, I've got a lot going on in my life, business and different challenges and managing people and self-destruction at some point and lots of things. And when I'm at my best, I've got the ability to handle a lot of different information. When I'm crippled with anxiety, I can't pick up my phone. I can't do anything. I can't decide what to put, you know, settings to put on the washing machine. It's just too much for me. It's like I've gone from here to here, and I don't understand why. And that's
Same with
sort
me.
of,
Yeah, mine's like, I know when I'm getting it because my chest feels tight. It's almost like having coronavirus, and then I get it in the pit of my stomach. But for me, it's like the inverse. Actually, I'm constantly picking up my phone, scrolling through social media, which I
okay,
actually want to come on to actually, because you've got some
okay.
interesting views on social media a bit later. But yeah, scrolling through social media, trying to. There's like a switch that flips in my mind, which is okay, where am I getting my self-worth now from? Because I feel like I don't have any self-worth. So let me look at how many likes or people that have followed me, or look at my LinkedIn, or something external, which is feeding me that what I perceive is to be love or adulation from people, which is just bollocks at the end of the day. But that it's just amazing how the mind does that.
Yeah, and I do that too, you know, and I absolutely, I know, I guess nowadays, you know, I never want to kind of, haven't got it perfectly sussed. I don't think you ever do with these sorts of things. I think you're
No.
always evolving and growing, but I've got a chance nowadays, you know, I'm aware of it. So when I start doing exactly what you're doing, like you're aware of it, I'm like, oh, you know, I know what I'm doing here. And so I have to kind of try and pull it back. But that outside affirmation, you know, it's like, you know, I think I write about it in the book, but I was kind of always obsessed with loving people. You know, I love you. What I
Yeah.
realized in rehab is because basically I wanted them to tell me that they love me, you know, and it was kind of like, I didn't actually have any real perception of what love until genuinely until now with Joe. I didn't really know love was transactional for me. You know, it was about making me feel better.
Same as me.
Mm.
I wanted to go back to, you talk very, very openly and incredibly candidly as well in the book about the Friday and the kind of days leading through the Priory. So you had 28 days in the Priory. You were sat down on the Friday, right, just before, by friends, and it was becoming noticeable that something needed to happen. Take me back to that Friday. You've been drunk for 10 days. There
Yeah.
was a problem here, clearly, and
Yeah.
friends and family started to notice it. What happened?
Yeah, it's amazing to think back on because I mean, it was quite clear that I was in a world of trouble. Yeah, I was totally oblivious to it. You know, that's the sort of sense of, you know, the power of denial is extraordinary in those times. But yeah, I'd started on my 35th birthday, and this was kind of day 9 or 10, and you know, I've basically been drinking non-stop by sort of, except for sort of passing out or, you know, moving from one place to another for a temporary bit. You know,
And
by and
sorry
large.
sorry to interrupt. Do you know what triggered that 10 days of um, constant
No, I mean,
moving?
no, I don't. I got invited to a friend's house for drinks that night for my birthday, and my anxiety was off the scale. I'd never, you know, normally I was always nervous about social environments. I'm funnily enough, I'm not anymore, but I was then. And so I'd have a couple of drinks and it would settle me. And that night I just couldn't, I was just sort of shaking uncontrollably. I was terrified. And it was like, I was like, okay, I need to just drink to get to that place where I'm going to be okay. And it just didn't come. And it was just felt like, as bad as everything was, suddenly it was in me, it was like, I'm at the jumping off place here, this is bad.
Wow.
And then I just couldn't, I went out that night until, you know, I basically, you know, carried on partying as long as I could. And then when I woke up, I just had this, you know, feeling in my stomach, like this kind of doom of, oh my God, this is terrible, this is awful. And that's, you know, I just think I need to carry on drinking. I can't come into reality. And I would just keep going, you know. And I got to that last day, and I, you know, I'd not slept very well. I was meant to take my daughter to hospital that day, and my wife at the time said, you know, no, you're not coming, rightly. And I kind of, I didn't understand why. And she was like, because you're drunk. And I was, you know, I couldn't you know, connect the dots. It was
No.
astonishing. And I was on, you know, I was in my own self-pity, and I was so self-absorbed that as you know, embarrassing, as awful as that is as a father, I just cried and took myself off to the pub and, you know, just carried on drinking. And I guess what I hadn't realized is over that period of time, my group of friends were kind of talking with each other going, you know, this is starting to get really serious. And that Friday it pushed it too far, and they called my parents, and, you know, they'd called the Priory, and, you know, it was clear that something needed an intervention of sorts.
Mm. Um, I've had a few guests actually on the podcast who've gone to the Priory,
Mm.
um, and they talk about it as this unbelievable experience. And Actually, you sit down in your interview that I watched with your therapist Sam at the Priory. You talk about the feeling um, when you sat down for the first time there, and you were kind of sitting there with a feeling which would have meant that you'd have to start drinking again. Like, what was the feeling?
I mean, to start with, it's awful. Because it's like a sensory overload. It's kind of like, what am I doing here? And I remember, like, I start the book that where did it start and finish for me to end up here? Where did it? That's all I could think. Where did it start and finish? I'm 35 years old. I thought I was the big I am, and here I was, basically dropped off and sat on my bed and lonely and everything in my life kind of falling apart. And it's just this sort of, but I will add to that, there was also a bit of relief. It was like there was this sort of bit of me where I can stop pretending.
Yeah.
I can stop pretending that everything's okay, because it's not. It's really, really not.
Yeah.
So you've got this kind of all these emotions going on of like, I didn't plan this. I shouldn't be here. I'm different to these people. And then another part of you going, oh God, thank God they've rescued me, and I don't have to, and you just, I can only tell from my experience, different people have different experiences of different rehab facilities. But for me in the Priory at that time, it was extraordinary. Sam, who you've seen on camera, was just an unbelievable person and was patient and tough. And when I talked my madness and, excuse me, and kind of waffled on, she would kind of, calm me down. And they just gave me time, they gave me time in which the fog cleared. And then they were like, okay, maybe there's a different way of doing this. And I needed that time.
You talk about in that first week feeling like you were in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And I can imagine it was incredibly humbling. You're kind of sat there thinking, yeah, great, I'm a first-class cricketer on the verge of playing for England, and actually now I'm sat here with a load of characters who I have no idea about, who have got these mad problems, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh my Lord, I'm one of these.
100%. And in my group was, gangland, drug dealer, priest, prostitute, lawyer, just housewife. There was just like the full array of different people. And, people with problems with alcohol, problems with drugs, problem with heroin, a range of drugs as well. It was just such a big mix. And it was definitely that feeling of like, well, I'm a bit better than you. And, they call it an ego deflating program. And I can absolutely, confirm that that's correct. And as soon as I got that smashed out of me, I started to listen.
It's almost like you're uncomfortably comfortable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I did actually know that. I mean, as weird as it was, and especially when the group session started, I think I described him as Lenny. I nearly said his real name then, Lenny in the book. When I first heard him share in the first group session, he was kind of gangland territory, and he just literally spoke my soul. And I just never.
What was your soul?
I was lonely. I was ashamed. I wanted to be a better man. That's the thing. I knew, like I said to you early on, when I drink, there was a bit of me that was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be that. I don't want to wake up thinking, oh no, I've done this again. And he talked about exactly the same thing in a very different way. I was kind of silver spoon background, and he was salt of the earth from the streets. Yeah, it was the same. And so even though I did think I'm a bit better than everyone, there was this thing in my head going, but I think these are my people. They kind of, they sort of talk that loneliness and that shame and that desire to want to get better, but no idea how to do it.
I want to move on to success, because we had a chat before we started recording, and we're very similar with this success complex. But you were taken out. Well, you left one of the sessions, right? And then you went outside and you sat in this beautiful garden with the therapist. And they said something which kind of changed your life, right? It was like, Luke, what makes you happy? And you said being successful. I can totally understand why you said that. But I also want to explore why you said that, and why did success make you happy? because it actually wasn't making you happy. It was
No,
perceived happiness. Yeah.
exactly right. Yeah, it was a perception. That's exactly right. Because you know, he and I it at that time when I answered that question with Jonathan, he said to me, you know, you're going to remember that for a long time. And I didn't have a clue what he was talking about. I
Mm.
actually thought I thought I'd given a good answer, you know, and so I didn't. Even though it was a life-changing moment, it didn't change my life at that moment. It was a progression from there, but it's always now for me an important flag in the ground type moment. It was because I was up to that point in my life, my sense of happiness and self-worth came from outside of me, you know? So
The external
like,
locus of validation, right?
absolutely. Yeah. And there was no greater one than being perceived as being successful. So what I was basically saying was when I'm successful, people like me and then I like me, you know? And so I just need to keep being successful or at least appearing successful, you know? And that's basically what I was saying. And he was making the point to me that, you know, which I couldn't see at the time, was there's no deep happiness. There's nothing in your soul, like I described as a hole in your soul. And it was just, it's such a perfect kind of moment to describe the journey that you go through.
What do you think it is about success which fuels such a spectrum of problems in essence?
Well, I think, you know, so the important thing is I like being successful today. Definitely. You
Yeah.
know, of course I enjoy it. But I don't define myself by it. You know, I genuinely don't validate myself with that. I could do something that, you know, earned me lots and lots of money and everyone thought was wonderful, but I don't go into bed going, yes, no, I'm good. No, I don't. My measure is in with my children and my partner and how I am as a human being. That's my measure. And you know, what am I doing as service to my you know, my family and the world? Am I being a good person? That's where I validate myself from now, or I get my bearing of where I'm at.
Mm.
So I think that sometimes people, when they hear this, they're like, oh, you're saying, oh, we should all be fluffy and not worry about winning and stuff like that. I'm like, no, not at all. You know, I manage people now, and if they win an Olympic gold medal, it has an, you know, an enormous impact on theirs and my life. So of course we want to win, but it's a balance between where success becomes where you attach your entire self-worth and being on the earth. It's about that, and that's not real. It's not going to fulfill you. It might do for a brief moment, but then you have to get more of it. It is literally a drug going, okay,
It's
you know, the
actually so
guy.
it's so dangerous, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, I'm going to
For
earn a
me, it
million
drove me to
pounds
being suicidal.
You know, exactly. You know, I'm going to earn £1 million and then I'll be happy. You
It's funny you
won't.
say that.
You'll
I
get
said
sick.
when I was 16, I said to my mum, "I'm gonna earn £1 million by the time I'm 30." And then
Yeah.
obviously that then evolved into this model of success, which was, yeah, one, defined by my finances, two, then defined by my companies. When my companies didn't go the way I wanted them to go, or I perceived the way they wanted to go, it was like the world ended because I'd lost my identity. I was putting out on social media, and I want to really segue. The segue is nice into social media because I know you enjoy talking about social media, and I'm interested in your views, coming from a sports agent's perspective. But um, I was putting this image on social media of what I thought success was, and following success accounts and being like, oh my God, yeah, this is what success looked like. But forgetting it comes from within. And if you can't actually find that place from within and reset your value system, it's almost impossible.
100%. I mean, you've nailed it. It's exactly right. It comes from within. It doesn't mean that you don't strive to achieve success and strive to achieve financial security and all of those sorts of things, of course. But the depth of happiness and self-worth comes from a
Mm.
different place. Yeah.
Mm. Why do you think society has a success problem? Because I think that's kind of your view.
Yeah, I think it's because I mean, over the, I mean, I could rant on about this for ages actually, but I think in a world in which, you know, where we're more connected than we've ever been, we're actually more disconnected than we've ever been, you know, and that applies in lots of different ways. The way that information is used nowadays to weaponize against people, and is a dangerous kind of, it's a dangerous time, I think. And I think the use of success and appearing success via social media has gone to such a place that everything is aspirational.
Yeah.
Everything is reality TV. It's like, well, if my life can be like that, if my life can be like that, then social media, if I could just do that. And everyone's kind of looking over the corner around the hill, and they can't see where they are at that moment in time with their own present and their own self-worth and everything that goes with it. So I think it's become this kind of, I don't know, kind of greedy success grabbing time but people have kind of got it misaligned.
And obviously your company, Activate Management, you represent a whole host of professional sportsmen and women. From an agent's perspective, like, how has your experience changed how you now represent men and women on the sports field? And like, what kind of advice do you give to those people about social media? Because I was listening to another podcast you did, and you talked about actually you now go to dressing rooms and there's like young men and women just heading their phones straight after and putting pictures up of the game or whatever it might be. And there's this loss of sense of being in the moment almost, and nobody's ever living in the moment anymore.
No, yeah. I mean, my advice to, the social media, and this is the other kind of thing I want to make clear. I'm not anti-social media. I'm actually massively pro it. And I think I encourage all my clients to engage with it, because it's here. The younger generations, it's their life. I've got 11-year-old twins who, like looking at TikTok more than anything you can imagine. So you can be you can fight against it. You're going to lose. So it's here. Embrace it, enjoy it, see it for what it is, but see it for what it is. And the detachment of reality to what you're seeing is a really, really important thing for my young clients to understand. So if they're in a habit of finishing a game and going, okay, I'm going to put an image up on social media, and if I get X amount of likes, we're all good. That's a dangerous spot to be in, because that's where you're getting your affirmation from, and your sense of worth, and you're into that trap that we're talking about. So it's not a case of, for advice is, engage with social media, be authentic, be real, but see it for what it is, and if you feel yourself slipping into just being consumed by it and what it's telling you, then you need to, kind of get your roots back down.
And how prevalent is this as a problem?
It's absolutely rife. Yeah.
Really?
I mean, it's, absolutely rife. As it is in society, so, there's that sort of famous Johnny Wilkinson quote where he says, I don't need to read about how I played in the press, because I know how I played I know how I played. I know it in my gut. And that was a really powerful statement back in the day, where it was like, I don't need to pick up the newspapers and look at it. But in today's world, it's not even a case of picking up the newspaper. You could go onto Twitter and you're going to get, 5,000 views of how you played in that day. And so the fact is that if you're a young person growing up today, your life is in social media. So therefore, telling them not to read it is impossible. It's part of their life. So you've got to help them with the balance of how they perceive it and what they get from it. And, that can be a case of someone going, well, I thought I played pretty well today, but read a few comments and, I should have done better on that, whatever it might be. And suddenly they're listening to everything on social media rather than with themselves and with their coach and, the people that matter in that case.
How has your attitude changed towards managing players now through your experiences? Because I think that's a really interesting topic to discuss, actually.
Yeah, I just view it as being, I'm a part of my service. And, I was talking about it earlier, as a person on human being, is that I manage young sports people as best I can from a, human point of view. So it's not about just making as much money as we can. In fact, if I need to leave money on the table for their well-being in the long run, I'm absolutely 10 out of 10 times going to do it. Because I just want to I just think as a young sports person, and people don't always want to feel sorry for, successful young sports people, and I understand that, but they do face a lot of challenges along the way.
Mm.
And, and I don't I got to a place in my life, and the people I manage are much more high profile than I ever was, that, that, I was desperately lonely and felt ashamed of who I was. And for everything that had gone on in my life, it didn't matter at all at that point. I don't want any of my clients to ever get to that place. So for me, about managing them is, of course, helping them with their career, helping them win, maximize whatever they can, but also helping them live a happy and sustainable life.
Mm. There's been quite a lot of talk actually over the years about how cricket has quite well. I'd probably describe it as quite a serious mental health problem. I think I read. You might correct me on this, but like 75% of cricketers experience mental health problems at some stage in their career, which I'm sure is similar to a lot of sports, but it seems more of a hotbed within cricket.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know that. I know that the statistic in professional cricketers was officially 1 in 4 professional cricketers was seeking help for mental health issues last
Which is
season.
unbelievable.
Yeah, but I mean, those are the official statistics.
Yeah.
There'll be guys
Most
who are
ones
not registering on there, and so I sort of say to cricket fans, 1 in 4, you're looking at 2 in a team who are seeking help. The reality is it'd probably be 4 or 5 of them. So, and the numbers are alarming and going up exponentially. And I think it goes with where mental health issues are within general society now. And we've got to wake up to that. And I know people are, but my challenge in professional sport is, not just talk about it, but understand where the solutions lie. And I don't think that we're very good at that. We're great at doing a campaign of it, hashtag it's good to talk. Of course it is, but at some point you have to, get more kind of nitty gritty about it. I think with
but why do you think cricket has such a big problem?
Yeah, so I think with cricket, the key is that it's a long game, so it's wearing mentally and physically. You're traveling an awful lot, so you're away from home a lot. You're isolated a lot. It's it's a different experience as a sport to and I'm not saying with any of these other sports, they all have mental health challenges as well. But say it's rugby and you go on and you're just running into people for 60 minutes. Cricket, Manasseh Hussain described it as being, it's like taking an exam every day. This kind of dissection of where you're at as a cricketer, and that's very mentally wearing. So if someone is, getting mentally broken down and burning out, and they're isolated a lot, and they're traveling a lot, it's a bit of a melting pot for them to find that too much. And then you add into it the pressures of social media and everything that go with it, and I think that's where the problems come from.
I've had quite a few rugby players on the podcast recently, and we've discussed what rugby can do to help their players with mental health. And I think actually rugby does very, very well in conjunction with the RPA and other organisations in helping. And the culture shift has been huge. Like, what do you think? I know the PCA does a lot of work in terms of mental health, and I think you've been a bit of a part of that. But what can cricket do more?
So, I mean, I think the PCA, but the PCA and the RPA in rugby's case, they do as much as they can. I think they're all brilliant organisations. I think significant change, though, is going to come from the professional bodies, as in that makes them sound like they're not professional bodies, but the actual clubs. So, the reality of professional sport is, and people don't, every time I say this, don't particularly like me saying it, but it's the truth, is that when the push comes to shove, what matters is what's going on the field.
Results.
That's what matters. Yeah, results. So, I could list countless examples where guys have been off the field in difficulties, either with their mental health or addiction issues, but yet still playing well because they can, because it's not sustainable, but because their intensity is at such a level that they can do it. They can push themselves to the absolute limit. And the attitude from the clubs at times can be, well, listen, if they're playing well, there is no problem, leave it. And I think if we're really to get on top of this kind of stuff is when the clubs have to say, okay, we're clearly measured by success, but we're going to watch our players on a broader level. And you know, if we understand the kind of players being in the bookies every afternoon for the last 2 weeks after training, we don't all laugh about it, about how he loves the bet and loves the horses. We actually, someone goes, is he all right? You know, and let's, regardless of how he's doing on the field, or if a guy's clearly drinking too much, but backing it up the next day, someone goes, is he all right? Or, you know, even if a guy's kind of sleeping with, you know, 10 different girls at different times, you know, someone's like, is he okay? You know, and those questions on the actual club level don't, in my opinion, don't get asked enough. You know, it's all about the results, and let's just focus on that.
I want to go through a quick fire question round, actually, which I didn't actually prep you for,
No,
which
that's
is
fine.
good. There's 5
good.
questions.
Okay.
So number 1, what's your favorite book and why?
The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. It was a book that was given to me when I left the Priory, and I read it. It's difficult to describe as a favorite book because it's pretty heavy reading, as in, you know, but it's a life-changing book. It's an extraordinary book. But I'll add in Andre Agassi's autobiography is also very, very good.
Interesting. Number 2, what lesson have you learned in your life that you know is true but you kind of hate?
Just do the next right thing. So any given moment, at any given time, just do the next right thing. That's it. Don't get too wrapped up in the outcomes in the future, or be dwelling on what happened. Just do the next right thing.
And why do you hate it?
I don't hate it. I just find it difficult at times when my mind wants to take me to, you know, so I kind of like, oh God, yeah, it's like your mum talking to you, you know, yeah, I know I need to do that, but, you know, can I just like get absolutely manically worried about what might happen in the future just for a little bit? Just let me enjoy that pain that I put myself through. But, you know, yeah, just do the next right thing.
Very interesting. Number 3, your friend who's having a really tough time at the moment picks up the phone. He rings you and he's saying he's having a really, really bad day today. What do you say?
I say, I'm here for you, and let's stay in close contact. I want to talk to you lots today, and you've got me for as long as you need me right now. Tell me how you're feeling, and try and identify with that, and share that you've felt those feelings before, and that they're not on their own, and that you love them, that you're there for them. I think that's the most important thing. It obviously depends on what type of difficulty they're struggling with. If it's a kind of addiction issue, then whether it's the right time or not, you need to point them in the right direction for things like that. But the most important thing is to in my opinion, is to not let that person feel alone. You know, try and share with them, because if you felt it before, you will understand what they're talking about. And it's just about saying, listen, I'm here for you. I'm not judging you. I'm here to support you. You've got me for as long as you need me.
Nice. I really like that. Number 4, when you're struggling with something, struggling yourself, and obviously you've been sober for 9 years now, but mental health, as we know, never stops. What do you turn to? What do you do to improve things?
My family's a big thing. My partner now, Jo, is just an unbelievable woman and unbelievable human being. And if I feel myself venturing off, I you know, I talk to Jo can often see it, and nowadays it's about work, really. You know, suddenly I'm like obsessing about work, and I'm kind of, you know, I can't sleep, and I'm working at all hours, and she'll pull me back, or I'll pull myself back and go, I just need a bit of time, you know, with you and the kids, and we'll go, and I switch everything off, and I kind of come back, and, you know, without sounding too hippie, we meditate a lot, and I get a lot from that. And it's just kind of, it grounds me, you know, brings me back into what's good. And we just talking about it helps me so much.
It's funny when you say that without sounding too hippie. I mean, I meditate and I swear by it, but it's just this interesting, I suppose, stigma attached to it, isn't it?
I know, it's weird, isn't
But
it?
do you know what? The art of mindfulness is one of the most important things for everybody to do.
I know, I agree, and I sort of cringe at the fact that I sort of apologise for it as being a bit hippie, but I agree with you. I don't really understand why. I wish everyone would try it.
Yeah. Number 5, last question. You're lying on your deathbed, looking back at your life. What are you most proud of?
that I was a good father, that my children knew that I loved and support them and I did my best for them. You know, it didn't mean that I got it perfectly right always, but I was doing my best and they knew that I loved them. And that Jo knew that I loved her and was the best possible man I could be. That my ex-wife knew I was the best possible ex-husband I could be. And my, you know, for my parents, they knew that over that period of time, I'd been like a roller coaster, but they knew that I was always trying to be the best I could be, and that I loved them, and that would be it. Everything else is irrelevant.
That's a really nice. That's really nice, actually. It's been an absolutely wonderful hour, Luke. I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast. You've got a new book out, right?
I do. Well, it's coming out in November. Yeah.
So anybody interested in the world of sports and agents,
Yes.
is it called The Man in the Middle, right? The Middleman.
No, it's The Middleman. Yeah, it's called the life of a sports agent, The Middleman. I actually always wanted to call it The Middleman, but the publishers said you need to, you know, have something in there that tells you it's about being a sports agent. Yeah, so I actually got asked to originally write that book before I wrote Back from the Edge, and I kind of asked them if I could just write Back from the Edge to start with. Yeah, and it's just I've obviously been a sports agent for a long time, and I've worked in virtually every sport there is, so I've got a pretty good range of understanding of the industry, and I think there's very little written about sports agency. A lot of it is kind of braggadocio, kind of, you know, you'll be driving a Bentley in 2 weeks type thing, and then and I kind of was like, no, I really want to explain the industry and exactly what happens, and tell some good stories of stuff that's happened with different clients, which, you know, of course they're all fine with those stories being talked about. But I think it'll be a combination of interesting, entertaining, and probably a bit of knowledge gaining.
For anybody who's listening, please read, if you haven't already, Back from the Edge, because it's an unbelievable read for anybody who's interested in mental health, addiction, and especially in sport, and also the Man in the Middle. Fast. I'm gonna read it myself. We've got 1 minute left. Thank you so much, Luke, for coming on.
No problem.
Really,
It's been an absolute
really
pleasure.
appreciate it.
Let's stay in touch.
Yes, definitely.
All right.
Take
Great
care.
stuff. Thanks, James.